My parents gave my sister $560,000 for a house and gave me nothing. But you're the failure. So I stopped calling them. 2 years later, my sister drove past my property and called Dad screaming, "You need forget what I did next." Alright, gather round, because there's a story I need to tell you. A story about how I was called a complete and utter failure by my own family, all while my sister received a staggering $500,000 gift. But what they couldn't see then was that their harsh judgment and that shocking secret would actually be the very thing that finally set me free. My name's Blake, and I just turned 32. Today, I'm standing on these 5 acres of woodland my grandparents left me, feeling a connection I never expected. This quiet piece of earth, tucked away from the city, was never part of my life plan. But let me tell you, plans change. Especially when you realize the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally defined you by what you weren't. I grew up in what looked like a picture-perfect upper-middle-class family in Connecticut. My dad, Richard, was this powerhouse corporate lawyer, his office overflowing with awards. My mom, Patricia, a tenured economics professor, published and respected. From the outside, we were the American dream, a beautiful colonial home, perfectly manicured gardens, a 3-car garage. Then there was my sister, Olivia. 3 years younger, but in my parents' eyes, light years ahead. Olivia was the golden child, practically from kindergarten. Perfect report cards, science competition wins, playing the violin like a prodigy. My parents beamed, throwing elaborate parties, plastering her certificates everywhere. Me? I was the family wild card, as my dad so charmingly put it. My grades were average, mostly BS, unless art was involved. Standardized tests? Forget it. My mind was always wandering, drawn to the compositions I wanted to photograph, not the equations. Art was my sanctuary. Behind a camera lens, I found a clarity that textbooks never offered. Our home ran on a brutal kind of currency. Love and approval were earned through success, not given freely. Dinner was Olivia's nightly stage, a showcase of achievements, while I just pushed food around, dreading the inevitable questions about my grades. When Olivia won a state debate championship, Disney World for the whole family. When I had my first photography exhibit, my mom popped in for 30 minutes, then left for a faculty meeting. My dad didn't even show up. It was a pattern. Olivia's soccer games had both parents cheering. I walked home alone from the darkroom, protecting my wet prints. They weren't cruel, not exactly. They just invested their attention where they saw the best return. The defining moment came my senior year. I got into several colleges, including a prestigious art school in New York and my dad's law alma mater. The choice seemed obvious to everyone but me. The argument that exploded when I announced I was pursuing photography still rings in my ears. We were at the fancy dining table, chandelier casting harsh shadows. My dad slammed his hand down. "No daughter of mine is going to waste her life taking pictures. That is not a real career, Blake." My mom, ever the mediator, tried to soften the blow. "Darling, we just want what's best. Photography is so competitive." "I am not going to law school," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm studying photography. That's my decision." The silence was deafening. Then my dad stood, straightened his tie, and delivered the ultimatum that would redefine everything. "If you choose this path, you choose it alone. We will not pay for an art degree. Our money is for real education, not fantasies." I still remember Olivia's face. Shock, yes, but also something else. Relief? Pity? A bit of both. That night, my life irrevocably changed. I accepted the art school offer, knowing I'd have to work multiple jobs. Scholarships, student loans, forging my own path, completely alone. True to his word, my dad cut me off. My mom would occasionally slip me cash during our infrequent coffee dates, but it barely scratched the surface. Meanwhile, Olivia thrived at her Ivy League, tuition, apartment, everything fully covered. For years later, I graduated. No one from my family was there. My classmates had proud parents and flowers. I had an empty chair. That day, I promised myself I'd build a life that made me proud, even if it never impressed them. With my degree and a portfolio I believed in, I rented a tiny studio in Brooklyn. No safety net. No family connections. Just raw determination and my camera. My first years were a masterclass in persistence. My apartment was barely 500 square feet, a kitchenette so small I could touch both walls. The bathroom had a leak that sang me to sleep at 3 a.m. But it was mine. Paid for with my money. And that made it beautiful. I built my career from the ground up. Wedding gigs for friends of friends, product photography for small businesses, headshots for broke, aspiring actors. I was a barista 5 mornings a week to cover rent, edited photos in the afternoons, and poured my evenings into my portfolio. Exhausting, but purposeful. I learned to live frugally. Every spare dollar went to camera equipment or student loans. I networked tirelessly, handing out business cards I'd printed at the coffee shop. Holidays were the hardest. I'd take the train back to Connecticut, modest gifts in hand, only to feel like an outsider. Conversations revolved around Olivia's achievements or my parents' social circle. When I shared news about an exhibit or a new client, the response was polite but utterly disinterested. "That sounds nice, dear," my mom would say before pivoting to Olivia. My dad was less subtle. One Thanksgiving, after I mentioned my first commercial shoot, he looked up with a dismissive glance. "It's good you're finding work, Blake. But when are you going to get serious? You're nearly 30. Olivia's on track to make partner, engaged to that brilliant neurosurgeon. What do you have to show for yourself?" The comparison was constant. Crushing. Olivia's career at a prestigious law firm, her neurosurgeon fiancé, their upscale Manhattan apartment, luxury vacations, a lavish wedding planned. Her life was the exact blueprint. Still, I persisted. Monthly calls with my mom, occasional emails, family gatherings where I endured the subtle digs and disappointed looks. I held onto a sliver of hope that they'd eventually see I was building something meaningful, even if it didn't fit their definition of success. Then came the call that changed everything. My grandmother, my mom's mother, passed unexpectedly. My grandfather had died 6 months earlier. The double loss was devastating. My grandparents were my refuge. They were the only ones who genuinely cared about my photography, proudly displaying my work, introducing me as our talented artist. When my parents' rejection stung the most, my grandmother would say, "True happiness comes from following your own path." My grandfather would wink, "Some people just need more time to see what's right in front of them." They lived modestly but comfortably on a beautiful piece of land, 5 acres of woodland and open space with a cozy farmhouse they'd renovated. My childhood sanctuary. A place where I could breathe. The will reading was 2 weeks after the funeral. The family gathered, tense with unspoken expectations. I sat quietly, still grieving, when the lawyer cleared his throat. "To our beloved granddaughter, Blake, we leave our 5-acre property and farmhouse, knowing she will appreciate its beauty and find peace there as we did." The room went silent. My dad's face flushed. My mom's lips thinned. Olivia looked genuinely shocked. I sat frozen, unable to process it. The lawyer continued. The rest of their modest savings would be divided equally among all grandchildren. Afterward, my dad cornered me. "You need to sell that property," he hissed. "It's not practical. We can split the proceeds among the family." I was still in shock. "I need time to think," was all I could manage. "There's nothing to think about," he insisted. "You live in Brooklyn. You can't maintain a property that far away. Be reasonable for once." I left with a property deed, my head spinning. I had no idea what I'd do, but something deep inside told me selling it would betray my grandparents' trust. The first time I visited, I was overwhelmed. The farmhouse needed work. Paint peeling, porch sagging. My grandmother's immaculate garden was a tangle of wildflowers and weeds. Yet, despite its neglect, the property held undeniable magic. Tall oaks rustling leaves, a small stream murmuring, deer at the forest's edge. This was my sanctuary. This was my land. My practical side knew my dad was somewhat right. Maintaining it from Brooklyn would be a nightmare. Repairs I couldn't afford. Taxes. Selling would be sensible. But when had I ever chosen sensible? I returned to Brooklyn, soil under my fingernails, my head full of wild ideas. The next day, my dad called. A family meeting at their house. A summons, not a request. When I arrived, the tension was thick. My parents, Olivia, and Daniel sat stiffly, a united front. I sat on the ottoman, already outnumbered. My dad got straight to it. "We've discussed the property. We all agree the best course of action is to sell. The market's booming, we could get a good price, benefit everyone." "By everyone, you mean you?" I snapped, unable to stop the edge in my voice. "Blake, be reasonable," my mom interjected. "What will you do with 5 acres? You can barely keep your tiny apartment in order." Olivia leaned forward, a practiced mask of concern. "We're just thinking practically. You're always struggling financially. This could give you a cushion." "And what would my share be?" I asked, already guessing. My dad cleared his throat. "Well, since your grandparents already gave you the property, the bulk of their estate, it would be fair if the proceeds were divided among the rest of us." The injustice hit me like a physical blow. "So, I get nothing?" "I sell my inheritance and hand the money over to all of you. You need to think about what's best for the family," my dad said, his lawyer voice emerging. "This is about being practical." "No," I shot back, a lifetime of frustration bubbling over. "This is about control. This is about you being unable to accept that I might have something valuable that you don't control." The argument escalated fast. Words were said that couldn't be unsaid. Then, in a moment I'll never forget, my dad stood, pointed his finger, his face contorted. "You have been nothing but a disappointment since the day you chose that worthless career," he bellowed. "A complete and utter failure. We gave you every opportunity, and you threw it all away for what? Pictures? While your sister has made something of herself, built a real career, started a real life." The room fell silent. Even Olivia looked shocked. A real life. I repeated quietly. You mean the life you orchestrated for her? The one you bankrolled completely. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Olivia wouldn't meet my eyes. What does that mean? My mother asked, her voice suddenly cautious. It means I know about the house, I said, looking directly at Olivia. The $560,000 house you got as a wedding present while I was working 3 jobs just to make rent. The secret, carefully guarded, tumbled out. My parents had bought Olivia and Daniel a luxury townhouse, complete with custom renovations. $560,000 of support, while I had been cut off for pursuing my passion. That was different, my dad insisted. Olivia chose a sensible path. She earned our support. She earned your love, I corrected him. I never did. I stood up, feeling calmer than I had in years. I am not selling the property. Not now, not ever. It's the one thing in my life that came without conditions, without judgment. I'm keeping it. You're making a mistake, my father warned. No, I said, heading for the door. For the first time in a long time, I am absolutely certain I am not. I left without looking back, ignoring my mother's pleas. In my car, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. Then, I did something I'd never done before. I drove straight to the property. As the sun set, I parked, walked to the porch, and sat on the steps. Okay, I whispered to the darkening sky. Let's do this. 2 years passed in what felt like both an instant and an eternity. The day after that fateful meeting, I made a decision that shocked even me. I gave notice on my Brooklyn apartment, put most of my belongings in storage, and moved into the farmhouse with just the bare essentials and my camera gear. The first few months were brutal. The house was falling apart. I slept in the only room without water damage, showered with a garden hose rigged to an outdoor spigot. I learned to patch roofs, replace rotting wood, and fix crumbling plaster from YouTube tutorials. My career transformed just as dramatically. I couldn't do urban photography here, so I pivoted. I started documenting my journey, restoring the farmhouse, reconnecting with the land. I captured the changing seasons, the wildlife, the process of clearing overgrown paths. At first, I just posted on social media to feel connected. To my surprise, people loved it. My followers grew as I shared not just beautiful nature shots, but the raw reality of my new life. The collapsed ceiling, the raccoons in the attic, the first successful loaf of bread in the ancient wood stove. 6 months in, a popular lifestyle blog featured my story. Overnight, my audience tripled. A sustainable living magazine commissioned a photo essay. A small but steady income from my online presence, plus freelance photography jobs in nearby towns. With careful budgeting and growing recognition, I began to transform the property. I converted the barn into a studio. I planted a vegetable garden with heirloom seeds my grandmother had saved. I restored the apple orchard, learning to prune from a local farmer. That local farmer was Warren, my nearest neighbor. He appeared one spring morning with a basket of fresh eggs and an offer to help with the porch. In his 50s, with weathered hands and kind eyes, Warren became an unexpected friend and mentor. He taught me practical skills my art school education never touched: splitting firewood, identifying edible wild plants, repairing an engine, when to plant. In return, I helped him establish an online presence for his organic farm, photographing his produce and creating a website that drew new customers. Our friendship evolved naturally, 2 solitary people finding connection through shared work and mutual respect. My social media following, inspired by the tiny house movement, soon led to a lucrative business. I started hosting weekend photography retreats, teaching small groups how to capture nature's beauty. The old farmhouse, partially renovated, became a rustic guest house. I built 2 tiny cabins deeper in the woods for more accommodation, designed to blend with the environment. The irony wasn't lost on me. The career my parents dismissed as impractical was now my livelihood. The property they insisted I couldn't maintain had become both my home and my business. I had created something uniquely mine on my terms. My family relationship remained distant. Christmas cards, birthday messages, polite but brief responses to my mother's texts. I declined invitations with vague excuses. The constant ache of their disapproval faded to a dull throb, surfacing only occasionally. I found peace in my new routine. Mornings tending the land, days creating in my studio, evenings on the rebuilt porch, watching fireflies. I made friends in the community, people who knew me as Blake, the photographer, not Blake, the disappointment. Then, one crisp fall afternoon, as I was photographing the vibrant foliage by my stream, I heard tires on the driveway. Visitors weren't unusual, but a sleek black SUV I didn't recognize? That was new. And the person standing beside it, staring open-mouthed at my renovated farmhouse, Olivia. She looked the same, and yet completely different. Designer clothes, perfect hair, familiar. But there was something new in her expression, something I couldn't place. When she spotted me, camera in hand, her eyes widened. Blake, is that really you? I nodded, suddenly aware of my work boots, faded jeans, and flannel shirt. What are you doing here, Olivia? She gestured vaguely at the property. I was driving to a client meeting, took the back road. I almost didn't recognize the place. She paused, flustered. You live here now? You actually fixed it up. I do, and I did, I replied simply. She shook her head. I had no idea. No one did. Dad said you were probably just sitting on the property until you got desperate enough to sell. The mention of our father brought a familiar sting. Why are you really here, Olivia? My guard was up. She looked away, then back, with an expression I'd never seen before. Vulnerability. Did you know this whole area is being developed? Luxury homes going up less than a mile from here. A resort company bought out 3 farms already. I nodded slowly. I'd heard rumors. Warren had mentioned development pressure. Blake, your land could be worth $2 million now. Maybe more. It wasn't a question. Is that why you stopped by? To tell me about property values? Her composure cracked. We talked about it, okay? The whole family. Dad thought if I saw you, talk to you. He said you might listen to me about selling. The revelation stung less than it would have 2 years ago. I see. And what commission would you get for convincing me? Olivia flinched. Then, to my shock, her eyes welled up. You know what? You're right. I came here with an agenda. But standing here now, seeing what you've built. She gestured again. I can see why you'd never sell this. Her admission surprised me so much that I truly looked at her. The designer outfit couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. The perfect manicure couldn't disguise the tension in her hands. Are you okay? The question emerged before I could stop it. She laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. Am I okay? Let's see. My marriage is falling apart because Daniel works 100-hour weeks and when he's home, we have nothing in common except debt. My job is killing me slowly. The house, that ridiculous house Mom and Dad bought us, has a leaking roof that'll cost $30,000 to fix. But I can never admit any of this because I'm the successful one, right? The one who did everything right. I didn't know what to say. This wasn't the confident, perfect Olivia I'd envied and resented. I should go, she said abruptly, wiping her eyes. I have a meeting. She got back in her SUV. Before closing the door, she looked at me with an unreadable expression. You know what the worst part is? You look happy, Blake. Actually happy. Then she was on her phone, her voice rising as she pulled away. Dad, you will not believe what Blake has done with that property. We need to. Her words faded as the SUV disappeared, leaving me standing alone, camera in hand, wondering what storm was brewing. That unexpected visit unsettled me for days. I found myself glancing at the driveway, half expecting my entire family to arrive. But a week passed, then 2. I began to relax, focusing on my work and the approaching winter. I was just finishing winterizing the beehives Warren had helped me establish when I heard another vehicle. This time, I recognized Olivia's SUV. What I hadn't expected was to see her parking beside a rental car that had just arrived. Olivia emerged, looking even more polished than before, armored in designer clothes. From the rental car stepped Daniel, her husband, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes that still screamed expensive. They stood awkwardly, clearly waiting. I didn't have to wonder for long. Another car appeared, my parents' luxury sedan. My stomach tightened. My father's determined courtroom expression, my mother looking anxious beside him. What is this? A family reunion. I called out, trying to keep my voice light despite the churning anxiety. We need to talk, Blake, my father said, skipping any greeting. About the property situation. Before I could respond, Warren's pickup truck rumbled up the drive, stopping behind the lineup of expensive vehicles. He nodded to me, a silent message of support. I invited Warren to join us, I said, gesturing. Since any discussion about this land affects him too. My father frowned, but said nothing as Warren approached. Shall we go inside? I suggested, leading the unexpected gathering toward my home. The looks on their faces as they entered the renovated farmhouse were almost worth the tension. The sagging floors were now a warm, golden glow. The crumbling plaster walls replaced with sustainable materials in soft earth tones. The kitchen, once outdated, now featured reclaimed wood countertops and energy-efficient appliances that blended harmoniously with the vintage charm. You did all this yourself? My mother asked, surprise in her voice as she ran her hand along a beautiful countertop Warren had crafted from a fallen oak. With help, I acknowledged, nodding toward Warren. We settled in the living room. My parents, Olivia, and Daniel on the sofa I'd reupholstered. Warren and I in chairs opposite them. Through the large windows, the autumn forest was a backdrop of golden crimson. This is quite rustic, my father said, clearly struggling to find anything negative. Thank you, I replied simply. Now, what is this about? My father cleared his throat, slipping into his lawyer persona. As Olivia may have mentioned, this area is being rapidly developed. The Ridgeline Resort Group has purchased several surrounding properties, planning a major luxury development. Golf courses, spas, high-end homes, the works. I nodded. I'm aware. 3 of my neighbors have sold already. They're offering extraordinary prices, he continued. Well above market value. Your 5 acres are particularly valuable because of the stream and the elevation. They're very interested. And how do you know that? I asked, though I already suspected. Daniel spoke for the first time. I have a patient who sits on their board. When he heard about our connection to property in the area, he asked if we might facilitate an introduction. I see. I looked at each of them. And you all came here today to convince me to sell? To discuss the possibility, my mother corrected gently. This could be a wonderful opportunity for all of us. All of us. I repeated. So, you're still expecting a share of my inheritance? My father shifted uncomfortably. Blake, be reasonable. This land has appreciated enormously in value through no effort of your own. It would be fair to distribute the windfall among the family. No effort. I gestured around the renovated space. I've put 2 years of sweat and every penny I had into this place. I built a business here. I built a life here. Taking pictures is not a real business, my father dismissed. Actually, Warren interjected, his quiet voice commanding attention. Blake runs one of the most successful businesses in the county now. The photography retreats bring visitors from all over the country. They support the local economy, staying in town, eating at our restaurants, shopping in our stores. My father looked at Warren as if seeing him for the first time. And you're Warren Milligan? Blake's neighbor and friend, Warren added, emphasizing the last word. Olivia, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke. Blake, no one is trying to take anything from you, but this could solve problems for everyone. You could buy a better property somewhere else, somewhere more convenient. We could all benefit. What problems would it solve for you, Olivia? I asked directly. She glanced at Daniel, then back at me. That's not relevant. I think it is. You said your marriage was struggling. You mentioned debt. Is this about money? Daniel's face flushed. That is private. Not if you're here asking me to sell my home to solve your problems, I countered. My mother looked shocked. Olivia, what is Blake talking about? The facade Olivia had maintained for so long finally cracked completely. The house is underwater, Mom. The mortgage, the renovations, the lifestyle we thought we were supposed to have. Daniel's medical school debt, my student loans. We're drowning. But your careers. Your salaries, my father sputtered. Go to keeping up appearances, Daniel said quietly. The cars, the clothes, the vacations, the social obligations, the networking events you insist we attend. The country club membership you gifted us that comes with monthly fees we can barely afford. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. My seemingly perfect sister and her successful husband were living a life they couldn't sustain. Trapped. I had no idea, my mother whispered. Of course you didn't, Olivia said bitterly. We never talk about real things in this family. Just achievements and appearances. I looked at my sister with new eyes, seeing not the golden child, but someone as trapped by our parents' expectations as I had been. The difference? I had escaped. She was still in that cage. I am not selling the land, I said finally, gently. Not to solve financial problems, not to make developers richer, not for any reason. This is my home. You're being selfish, my father accused, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. No, I replied. For the first time in my life, I'm being true to myself. And I think that scares you more than anything. Warren cleared his throat. If I might make a suggestion, Blake's property is not just valuable for development. It's valuable as it is. The photography business is thriving. The organic garden supplies local restaurants. The tiny cabins bring tourism to our community without disrupting its character. What's your point? My father asked impatiently. My point, Warren said, is that Blake has created something worth preserving. Something that benefits more than just one family or one corporation. Something sustainable. I felt a rush of gratitude. He articulated what I had felt, but couldn't express. He's right. What I've built here matters. Olivia looked at me with an expression I'd never seen, respect. I think I understand now. When I drove by and saw what you'd created, I was jealous, Blake. You look so content. So sure of yourself. I've never felt that way. Not once. Her admission stunned me. My perfect, golden sister jealous of me? So that's it? You simply refuse to consider the needs of your family, my father pressed, defeat in his voice. I have considered them, I assured him. But I've also considered my own needs. The needs of this land. And the needs of this community. The answer is still no. As the tense conversation continued, Warren excused himself. He returned a few minutes later with a basket, fresh eggs, late-season vegetables, and a jar of honey from my hives. Maybe you folks would like to take these back with you, he offered to my parents. Everything grown right here on Blake's property. Some of the best produce in the county. The simple gesture somehow broke the tension. My mother accepted the basket with genuine thanks. My father stood, straightening his jacket. We should go, he said stiffly. We have a long drive back. As they gathered, Olivia hung back. When we were alone in the kitchen, she turned to me. I never understood why you walked away from everything they offered you, she said quietly. Now, I think maybe you were the smart one all along. It was never about smart, I replied. It was about authentic. About finding my own definition of success. She nodded slowly. I need to find mine. I think you can, I told her. You know, it's never too late to change direction. Even with all their expectations, all the investment they've made in me becoming who they wanted me to be, especially then, I said. Take it from someone who disappointed them thoroughly. The world doesn't end. You just begin again. She hugged me then, an awkward but genuine embrace that felt like the first real connection we'd shared in decades. I'll call you, she promised. I watched from the porch as they all drove away, Warren standing silently beside me. When the last car disappeared, he turned to me with a small smile. Quite a family you have there. They are, I agreed. For better or worse. You stood your ground, he observed. Not many would have with that much pressure. I looked out over my land, at the life I had built from nothing but determination and faith in myself. Some things are worth fighting for. Life settled back into its rhythm. Autumn deepened into winter, covering my 5 acres with a pristine blanket of snow. I continued hosting smaller, more intimate photography workshops. The cozy farmhouse, with its wood stove, became a welcoming haven. Warren and I spent the cold months planning. We sketched designs for an expanded organic garden, talked about adding more beehives, drafted blueprints for 2 more tiny cabins. Our friendship had deepened into something more, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. As the snow melted, revealing the first green shoots of spring, Olivia called. Our conversation was awkward at first. Months of silence created a barrier. But gradually, as we spoke about neutral topics, the tension eased. I left the firm, she said finally, the words tumbling out. You did what? I sat on my porch steps stunned. I quit my job. Left the partnership track. Daniel and I are selling the house too. Olivia, that's huge. Are you okay? She laughed, a genuine sound I'd rarely heard. I think I am. For the first time in forever, I feel like I can breathe. Daniel's cutting back his hours too. We're renting a small apartment while we figure things out. What did Mom and Dad say? I asked, imagining their reaction. Dad didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, she admitted. Mom cycles between concern and disappointment. But you know what? I'm sleeping through the night for the first time in years. We talked for over an hour. Really talked, perhaps for the first time as adults, about expectations, about finding happiness versus achieving success, about the courage it takes to disappoint the people who raised you. I've been thinking about what you said, Olivia told me before we hung up, about finding my own definition of success. I'm looking into environmental law, using my degree for conservation work instead of corporate profits. That sounds perfect for you, I said, meaning it. I'd like to come visit again sometime, she added hesitantly. Just me. To see your place properly. Maybe learn a bit about what you do. I'd like that, I replied, surprised to discover how much I meant it. True to her word, Olivia visited a month later. She arrived in jeans and hiking boots, her hair in a simple ponytail, looking younger and more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. We spent the weekend exploring, talking about our childhoods. She asked thoughtful questions about my business, genuinely interested in what I'd built. On Sunday, as we sat on the porch drinking tea, she broached the subject we'd avoided. Mom and Dad want to visit, she said, watching my reaction. They asked me to ask you if that would be okay. I set my mug down slowly. Why no? Olivia shrugged. I think seeing me make such a big change shocked them. Dad keeps talking about legacy and family connections. I think he's finally realizing he might lose both his daughters if he doesn't bend a little. And the property? The pressure to sell? I think that ship has sailed. She said the developers moved their focus after I refused. Besides, I may have mentioned to Dad that what you've created here is worth more than any development check. The visit was scheduled for the following month. I spent weeks preparing, not to impress them, but to show them honestly what I had built. Warren helped me finish the new studio in the barn. I printed my best photographs. I harvested early vegetables from the garden and collected fresh eggs. When the day arrived, I stood in the driveway, watching their car approach with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Warren had offered to make himself scarce, but I asked him to stay. His steady presence was a reminder of the life and community I had created, independent of my family's approval. My parents emerged from their car, looking slightly disoriented, as if they'd arrived at the wrong address. My father wore casual clothes that still looked stiff. My mother carried a houseplant, clutching it like a shield. Blake, she said, stepping forward to kiss my cheek. The place looks different than I remember. It has changed a lot, I agreed. Come in, I'll show you around. The tour was awkward at first. My parents clearly struggled to reconcile the successful business and beautiful home with their perception of my failed career. My mother asked polite questions about the renovations. My father remained mostly silent, his expression unreadable as he took in the evidence of my thriving, independent life. The dynamic shifted when we reached the barn studio. The large, open space was filled with natural light from skylights I'd installed. My photographs covered the walls, a visual journey through seasons and landscapes. A long farmhouse table, set up for workshops, occupied the center of the room. "These are all your work?" my mother asked, moving closer to examine a series of sunrise images from my property. "They are," I confirmed. "They're quite beautiful," she admitted, something like surprise in her voice. My father stood before a large framed photograph of the farmhouse in winter, snow blanketing the roof, smoke curling from the chimney, golden light spilling from the windows. It was my favorite image, capturing not just the structure, but the feeling of home. "This is remarkable," he said quietly, almost to himself. "The quality of light, it tells a story." "That's what I tried to do," I explained, caught off guard. "Tell stories through images. Capture moments and feelings, not just scenes." He nodded, still studying the photograph. "I think I understand now." We moved to the porch for lunch. The table set with food I had grown or made myself. Fresh salad, eggs from my chickens, bread I'd baked that morning, honey from my hives, wine from a local vineyard where I'd photographed the harvest. As we ate, the conversation became less strained. My mother asked about my business model, her academic mind engaging with the practical aspects of what I'd built. My father, to my surprise, asked thoughtful questions about my photography techniques. Warren shared stories about the local community, the farmers market, the conservation efforts. He spoke about my contributions, the tourism my workshops brought, the articles that had put our small town on the map. "You've created something substantial here," my father finally acknowledged, setting down his glass of wine. "Something with real value. Not just financially, but intrinsically." Coming from him, it was an extraordinary admission. I felt a weight I'd carried for years begin to lighten. "Why did you never come to my exhibits?" I asked suddenly, the question emerging before I could stop it. Even in high school, when it would have been easy. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was my mother who answered. "We were afraid," she said simply. "Afraid you were making a mistake we couldn't fix. Afraid you would struggle and suffer. Afraid we had failed as parents if you didn't follow the path we thought was safe. So instead of supporting my choice, you punished me for making it," I said, the old hurt surfacing. "We thought we were protecting you," my father said. "We were wrong." The simple admission hung in the air, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement that carried its own weight. "And Olivia?" I asked. "The house, the financial support?" My father looked genuinely remorseful. "We thought we were doing the right thing, setting her up for success. But look how that turned out. She was miserable in that perfect life we helped create. We made many mistakes," my mother added softly. "With both of you in different ways." As the afternoon light faded, casting long shadows, my father stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out over the land. "I wouldn't have chosen this for you," he said finally. "This place, this life. I would have pushed you towards something I understood, something with a clear path. And I would have been wrong." He turned to face me. "You found your own way. Created your own success. I'm proud of that, even if I don't entirely understand it." From my father, those words were the equivalent of a standing ovation. Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you," I said simply. As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. "We'd like to visit again," she said. "If that would be all right." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. My father shook Warren's hand, then mine, holding on a moment longer. "You have a beautiful home," he said. "Thank you for sharing it with us." We stood in the driveway, Warren and I, watching their car disappear. "You okay?" Warren asked quietly. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't name. "I think so. It's not fixed, not completely. But it's a start." He took my hand, his palm warm against mine. "Beginnings are good," he said. "I'm partial to them myself." As we walked back, I looked at the life I had built from nothing but determination and a piece of inherited land. A home, a business, a purpose. And now, perhaps, the beginnings of a healed family and a new kind of love. Not the life anyone had planned for me, but the one I had created for myself. 1 year later, I stand on the newly built observation deck overlooking my property. It's transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The farmhouse restored. The studio expanded. 3 tiny cabins nestled in the trees. And the most significant addition, a small eco-retreat center near the stream. What started as a personal sanctuary has become a thriving community space. My parents are more involved now. My mother helped develop an educational curriculum. My father, to everyone's surprise, took up photography and sometimes joins my workshops. Olivia's transformation has been the most dramatic. She left corporate law, found work with an environmental nonprofit, using her legal expertise to protect natural spaces. She and Daniel divorced amicably. They realized their relationship was built on external expectations. She lives 30 minutes away now, visiting regularly. Warren, well, he's not just my partner in business, but in life. Our friendship evolved into love, built on shared values. He moved into the farmhouse last spring. Together, we continue to improve the property, each project reflecting our commitment to sustainable living and community. The path to healing with my family hasn't been straight. There are still moments of tension, old patterns. My father occasionally starts a comment about real careers before catching himself. My mother still sometimes compares Olivia and me. But these instances are rarer, replaced by genuine efforts to understand and accept us. The most profound change is with Olivia. The competitive dynamic of our childhood has transformed into a supportive bond. We've spent hours talking through our past, acknowledging how our parents' expectations shaped and sometimes damaged us. The golden child and the disappointment, each carrying our own burdens, have finally found common ground as sisters and friends. Are you ready for the group? Warren asks, joining me on the deck. 20 photographers will be arriving this afternoon. Almost, I reply, leaning into his solid presence. Just taking a moment to appreciate how far we've come. He nods. From a rundown farmhouse to this. Pretty incredible. Not just the property, I clarify. Everything. My family. My work. Finding you. Warren smiles, his eyes crinkling. Finding ourselves, I think. Separately and together. My parents and Olivia will be joining us for dinner tonight, a monthly tradition. These gatherings aren't always perfect, but they're authentic in a way our family interactions never were. We talk about real things, disagree respectfully, and leave with the understanding that love doesn't require agreement or identical paths. The financial aspect? While I steadfastly refuse to sell to developers, I found ways to make this life sustainable, even profitable. The retreats, cabin rentals, educational programs generate steady income. I published a book of images documenting the land, which received acclaim and opened doors. Most surprisingly, my father established a family foundation for environmental education and land conservation, funded by the sale of their oversized house. Its first project? Buying the land adjacent to mine, protecting it from development, expanding the natural buffer around my 5 acres. Your grandparents would be proud, my mother had said. They always believed in preserving beautiful,